Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby. Alphalist is a closed community with over 400 CTOs who share their knowledge and experience in a Slack space and at events. With this podcast, we want to give our members and interested parties insights into the thoughts and ideas of top CTOs. If you're interested in becoming a member of the community, please visit alphalist.com to find out more on how to apply. This episode is proudly presented by Dell Technologies. They are a team of experts that helps you solving all your IT-related challenges and IT needs in your daily business and consult you in choosing the right end-to-end IT solutions or products. They offer IT technology solutions for companies of any size, tailored to their needs, and have a huge product portfolio with IT solutions and know-how. They can help CTOs through providing end-to-end IT solutions, be it laptops, PCs, workstations, or server, storage, cloud, and IoT solutions or financing. If you want to know more, please check the show notes to get a link. Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today with me is Kore Nordemann, and he is CTO of Frontastic, and Frontastic is headless front end for e-commerce. Kore, first of all, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Absolutely correctly, which is not that simple, especially in English, because it originates from Norway and is written the wrong way and translated to German. And so, yeah, most people get it wrong, but absolutely correct.
Okay, but your accent, in a way, admits that you're from Germany as well, right?
Correct, yes. My parents only got that name during vacations in Norway and just heard it there. This is why it's written wrong. But yes, I originally from Germany and still working and living in Germany.
Okay, and you're building Frontastic. And what Frontastic is, we maybe dig a bit deeper. You're just about to close like a crazy big VC round from what I know, and it's yet kept secret, so not something to announce here. Still, I found you are like a pretty active guy in the PHP community, and you spent like a couple of years with PHP. Is that correct as well?
Yes, I would say I grew up in the PHP community. It was my first talk around 2005, I think. I gave many talks at many conferences, participated in a couple of books, wrote a lot of magazine articles, and was an active open source contributor to a couple of also kind of popular PHP projects. So this is where I come from, or where I developed my professional life, especially. I like also other languages, and I have a pet peeve for functional programming languages, which you cannot live as easily when working with PHP. But yes, I originate from the PHP world, and this is where I grew up.
And you're still actively using PHP and are actively coding, or?
I would love to be honest. In my role as a CTO, I almost never code anymore, to be honest. It's right now for me mostly about hiring people, and then it's about architectural, about product vision things, and it's a lot less about actual coding. Even I miss that from time to time, but since I have a 2 months old child already right now, I do not even have time in my spare time, if there is any left in a founder role, to work on anything which is related to coding. So actually not coding that much anymore, only assisting in debugging when it comes to issues which span all our systems. And it sometimes helps that I join debugging sessions, but besides that, no coding, sadly.
So you're the one who has that vision on bugs as well, right? Or that directly spots everything whenever it happens. Is that right?
Yes. I think this is a lot related to how much do you know about systems or complex systems, especially when the systems and the system interaction gets more complex. it really helps to have the full vision in mind. Luckily, I'm not the only one at Frontastic who has that, but also this kind of vision is really hard to transfer to other people. And this is certainly a benefit I have as a founder and as one of the technical co-founders who basically started creating Frontastic from the scratch. And yeah, that vision is irreplaceable, basically, and that cross-understanding or cross-service understanding.
I also see it like that this is like the a good baseline to start on, right? If you really come from the world where like the HTTP world, where things were transactional and request based, and now you enter the world of stateful applications and leave the world of stateless applications. It kind of at least helps knowing that. Knowing the world that was there before, right?
Absolutely. And one thing you learn when you go deeper into the stateful world we especially have in the front end right now, we always also had that in the back end, but this is maybe a different story and a different talk. But right now we are talking about state mostly in the front end when it comes to React, Redux, for example, but all those other implementations. It's also again and again about state. Even the state is maybe also often more indirect by using hooks or context in the React world by now. But in the end, we are talking about state in the front end, the state the user sees, the state of input elements, the state on the server, and how those interact. And if you compare that with the classic RESTful stateless request world we solved with PHP, Java, Ruby on Rails, all those tool chains we have and had, this front-end world is so much more complex because of merging different types of state and still maintaining a sensible UI state out of that. But yes, it's really helpful to know that. And I like when developers are aware of what stateless transfer means or what the architectural properties of HTTP are. But in the end, yeah, the thinking inside the front end and keeping a consistent UI state is maybe even more complex and also something really hard to learn.
Yeah, and why is it so hard?
I think it's mostly about asynchronicity. So if you process a classic HTTP request, it's basically input, process data, output. And maybe we do some backend calls in between, ask other backends if we are something like a backend for frontend integrating multiple other services. Then we have some calls, but it's always about at some point we are done with it and we just return a result and something has to process that result. And this flow basically never stops in the front end. A user comes to a website. We are talking about single page applications nowadays. And user enters the website, logs in, then you have the login state. Then they enter some information in some input fields. Usually, always, the applications are, of course, more complex than input fields usually. But in the end, it's that the user interacts with the website. And then suddenly you have different states inside complex domain models between what's inside the user interface and what is the current representation in the backend. And merging that also with failure resilience when we are contacting additional backend services asynchronously and update state in the backend, retrieve state updates from the backend, and creating a shared state, a unified state out of that. That's, for me, there's no easy way to solve that still. React does an excellent job or did an excellent job at proposing an architecture solving that, which then has been adapted by Vue, for example. Angular also, they are losing market shares from my point of view right now, but they also found nice ways to model that. But in the end, this is still really, really hard. And the actual state management is, again, also with Redux, MobX, and all the tools we have, still isn't really solved from my point of view. And it helps if you have a sensible abstraction in place, of course, for your domain model.
And a bit provocative. I mean, I also like single-page web apps, and I also decided for single-page web apps framework in the past. But every once in a while, I ask myself, is it worth it? And that's what I ask you now.
It might not always be worth it, and I'm sure it's not always worth it. So it depends a lot on what you want to implement. And we have an interesting situation that you have simple websites, I would say, which just share information. You could talk about a blog or something. And then certainly I wouldn't go for such a single page application in those cases. Just render some HTML on the server and you'll be fine. On the very far other end, we of course have what we know from native applications on our mobile phones and of course also from our desktop computers, where we have the state management and where we have complex applications, where you certainly would go for a native app when we talk about mobile devices. And then we have the space in between where it gets a little bit more blurry. And since Frontastic is e-commerce, let's use that as an example for now. Which e-commerce sites really need an SPA? For example, Amazon isn't an SPA, and probably that's the best way for them to go. But why would you go for an SPA for an e-commerce site? Or what could be the reasons for that? I think there are certain interactional patterns or user experiences which are a lot better modeled by single-page applications where you can merge all those states you have in maybe even multiple backends, the user flow, the user inputs, where you can create a great experience out of that. So to summarize it, or trying to summarize that, I would say, if you want to be excellent in the front end and want to provide excellence in user workflows, in user experience, then at some point you probably want to look at that. If you just want to be another online shop, or your differentiation inside the market depends on other things, which might be, for example, your products, and there are no competitors where you have to be, or where compared to them, you have to be better in user experience, then just go with the classic site, of course. But if you really want to capture the user and provide the best possible experience when doing online shopping, then at some point you should go, or basically must go to using an SPA. Does that make sense?
Well, partly. I mean, you just mentioned Amazon. I never thought about the fact that they actually don't use SPAs, but it's true. I mean, you can feel it as a developer using their shop. You can easily see it and easily feel it. I would love to ask Werner Vogels if he would decide for SPAs these days. And I could imagine that the answer would be no. And I think like they are kind of a very good competitor to look at, right? As like an owner of an e-commerce shop. So why do it if Amazon doesn't do it? And Amazon has like a lot of resources. I think it's a very valuable question. I mean, all of the said things absolutely make sense. All of the things you said absolutely make sense. But
yeah, I think it's about the target group of your online shop. So Amazon basically already won the war on e-commerce, of course, because they are by far leading in market shares, especially worldwide. So, but what is the main reason for shopping on Amazon? I mean, I'm not Amazon, so they probably have a better answer to that. But for me, it is just the assortment. So I know that everything I want to buy, I can get on Amazon. Can I use Amazon for inspirational shopping, for shopping of interesting things, of luxury goods? No, I don't think so. Or at least I don't do that, because discovering interesting products, for me, Amazon fails almost entirely at that, which I find surprising. But just a fun fact, this didn't happen very recently to me, but still like 2 years ago, you are looking at Nikon lenses and then Amazon suggests you a Canon body for a camera body. Why the hell are they doing this? Obviously, building excellent recommendation algorithms either is not worth the effort, according to Amazon, or given their assortment size, it's just impossible to do. But I think exactly there is a chance for smaller vendors. So I'm not talking about the, let's say, top 5 e-commerce sites in Germany, but how do we want to be a competitor to Amazon when you're selling products in a space where Amazon already exists and also Zalando, for example, exists? And I think there it means that you have to provide the facilities for users to actively discover interesting new products and maybe even buy things they do not really need and be inspired by your website. And then, of course, it's about user experience and about excellence in user experience, because those shops are not the default go-to place for buying basically anything.
Yes and no. I was actually looking at Zalando yesterday and just wanted to shop for a few clothes, and I just realized, maybe there are like certain tools on Zalando so that I can discover certain looks or shop for certain looks, but still I would be very old school on this still. And go to a shop and just like one shop, I know that this shop kind of has the style I like. And I just realized, I would go to the shop and buy whatever I want, and rather be pragmatic on it instead of trying to discover a new way of shopping clothes online, which maybe is or is not provided. And another example where this actually works, like inspiration actually works purely through the assortment. It's also a very old school and ugly website. It's AliExpress or Alibaba, where I every once in a while stumble in and click a few products and then end up ordering something crazy. And this is where it works also without like the rich experience. So I don't know if I agree with that, but honestly. Like also, I know that from like a technical perspective or like a fellow nerd perspective, if I would think about how to implement a faceted search best these days, I would maybe end up implementing an SPA, because that's
Absolutely.
just how it feels better from my perspective as an engineer. And that's how I like it most. But as a user, do I care? I think no, I don't care.
To be honest, to be successful as an e-commerce site, it's a lot about your assortment. That's and will always most likely be the most important thing. But if you have a competitor with very similar assortment, I think then it starts getting also to be about user experience. It's a stupid example after all, but I know that, for example, from my wife, I'm as an ITler or with somebody with an IT background, I usually don't care so much about about experiences, user experience. I just know, okay, this is hard. So if somebody fails in user experience, I'm able to just ignore that and still continue shopping. But I find this more interesting, seeing my wife using e-commerce sites. She gets so horribly annoyed if the user experience fails. And one of the most common examples is you're on a product listing page, you click on a product, then go back because you want to search for more products, and you end up in a different position in the product listing. She will stop using your online shop if you fail at that immediately, no matter what assortment you have and how much she's interested in your products. And I heard that from many people by now, and this is also an experience we see with users of our customers' online shops. So at some point, it will be about user experience. Of course, this scroll back to your earlier position will also or can also work in a traditional website, not in an SPA. But those things are important. Maybe we are not the right target group for that, because I also do not care so much personally, but I know the users of our customers do.
And I think also tech people like building it. Even for boring websites these days, right? If you look at frameworks like Gatsby or Next and Nuxt, then it's pretty much about like putting a single page web app on something where a single page web app doesn't belong, like on a static website where maybe the content is, grabbed from a certain Airtable or whatever and rendered then in an SPA, even if you don't need an SPA. But that's also the technical reality. Tech people love building that. And tech people sometimes strive for high complexity. And that is, I think, a danger that I'm also like openly aware of and facing. It's also fun every once in a while, but is it needed in all cases? I guess not.
Certainly not. I second that. I'm personally a big fan of simplicity and stupid technologies which just work. And this love for complexity, I think it's also kind of nice because this means people still love playing around. And this is one way of expressing also your creativity, playing around with tools, playing around with ideas. This is also a great trait. The question to me is, and always was also since many years, is where should I play around with those technologies? If it's your private project, go ahead, just do that. If this is your professional project and you or somebody else will have to maintain that for the upcoming years, then please think twice if you really want to go all crazy and all fancy with all the new shiny tools. Because one example, we touched that topic already and probably will again. I still like PHP. It's a dislike technology. I'm aware of that. And of course, the language isn't the most beautiful one. But PHP is damn stable and it will always be. All the problems you run into with PHP already had been solved 10 years ago and had been solved thousands of times ever since. This means if you're running a stack on top of PHP, it will be just stable. Now go for the newest, shiniest technology. I know how many people failed to run stacks on scale, especially on scale, because, if you don't get any serious number of requests, then it doesn't matter at all. But on scale, on top of Node.js for a couple of years, destabilized, of course, by now. But when a new technology emerges and you jump right on the hype train, you will run into a lot of problems. There are nice articles how Docker failed many people when it comes to storage, when it comes to interacting on with the storage devices on a Linux kernel, how this can fail in such funny and interesting ways. This, of course, is kind of interesting. But do I want to run my customers' money through those kind of stacks? I'm not sure. I'm always tempted to pick the most boring stack available. On the other hand, as mentioned, playing around with those things for your private projects, go for it. You will learn something.
So you don't recommend Docker then?
I think it's stabilized sufficiently by now. And there are a couple of people and companies who can run that. But we actually used Docker also for development environments of our customers. And Docker fails in so many interesting ways if you use it on random developer laptops and developer systems, developers updating to the most recent beta release of Windows or macOS, and then Docker will fail in interesting ways. So be sure what to use Docker for using something like Kubernetes for scaling very dynamic loads makes sense in many cases. It does not make sense for your single block, and it might not even make sense for every microservice you come up with. But there are use cases for that, for sure. But it's not always the best tool for each job, obviously.
The funny thing is that like the focus of Docker as a company or what they succeed with seems to be the end user, right? Seems to be the desktop application, seems to be the desktop client on Mac and Windows. That's at least how they spin it. But funny enough, like a lot of people I know switched from Mac to Windows because Windows is able to handle Docker more nicely, right? And
Absolutely.
That's really funny.
The recent pricing changes also basically advocate Docker for desktops. Maybe not because you suddenly have to pay for it. But yes, this shows that it's certainly a focus of them. But yes, we ran into so many problems with that. Of course, they are all solvable, but by now, just for a fun fact, if a developer needs a system in the background, running in the background to develop with, we just boot cloud machines and provide a simple shell tool, which makes sure their local changes are synchronized into the cloud. And this is what's a lot more stable, like magnitudes more stable for us and for our customers, developers.
I would also... I have high hopes in GitHub code spaces. I don't know if you looked at that.
Not yet.
Like the space in the cloud, you can just use VS Code, and you have a plugin. You can write everything on your local computer. You can do everything as it would be hosted on your machine, and it has a state. It has like a preview URL. You can just spin it up. And it just works. And if you're idle, then it automatically shuts down as if you have it on your desktop. So that's I see this could be. I mean, it's in a way like a thin client back then, right? But I see that like maybe this time it succeeds, right? Sometimes
this is actually what we are also providing our customers, developers with. We spin up those. We call them sandboxes. We spin them up. You run one command line tool in the background, which uses Mutagen, which is a great Go tool for that, by the way, which uses Mutagen to synchronize your local changes with that remote machine. And it just works. Everything just works on all the systems. Mutagen being Go works on all operating systems, Windows, Mac. No issues at all there since we deployed that to our customers. And yes, they just boot up. We call them sandboxes. And since then, we don't have any issues. So yes, Docker was supposed to solve that problem, but cloud machines are the better solution for us by now, with a small shell script running in the background in the end.
Yeah, funny enough. And yeah, maybe the development aspect and needing to boot up some sort of an environment on your local computer or iPad, maybe it just disappears at a certain time, right?
Could be. I think the complexity of integrated development environments or short IDEs is, I mean, with, for example, when talking about TypeScript, with all the type analysis and suggestions you get there, this will still always need a rather strong laptop CPU, for example, to be able to use that. I'm not sure how good over time, especially in bigger enterprise projects, web IDEs will get, but they could even solve that to correct. But right now, the power IDEs consume in bigger enterprise projects will still require a sensible laptop to use. But yes, if that is solved on top of that, then maybe you can even use web editors at some point and work on your iPad even as a software developer.
Yeah, would be great. This episode is kindly sponsored by Okta Customer Identity Management. If you're transforming into a digital platform and are facing identity management challenges, listen closely now, because Okta offers the market-leading solution to help you make identity and access management work as a service. A platform that offers endless ways to connect with your employees and customers. Get support for your most important customer-facing initiatives. Integrate identity and access into every app and create secure and engaging experiences in no time by outsourcing workforce or customer identity management to Okta. Get started in 15 minutes and test IAM or CM as a service. Create frictionless registrations and login experiences for your applications and make identity the foundation for your zero trust strategy and enable access for all users regardless of their location, device, or network. Visit alphalist.com/Okta to try it out. In an upcoming episode, I talk to Sagnik Nandi Okta's CTO about everything identity management.
Funny enough, I was just referring to thin clients back then, and in a way it was history repeating. We also have history repeating in other areas. So microservices, for example, like microservices versus monoliths. So I had like great guests here, like David Heinemeier Hansen or Charity Majors or the former CTO of Shopify, who were actively like fighting against microservices and against the complexity, and it perfectly fits the discussions we had around SPAs. And it's also history repeating, right? We had ZOA in the 90s, so service-oriented architecture, and now we have we come up with microservices. What is your take on that?
A similar one, I guess, because internally to my engineers, I say there are exactly two reasons to split out a service or microservice. I don't really like the term microservice because what's micro is not clearly defined. I heard people saying it's only micro if it's less than 100 lines of code or something like that. So it's a hard term, but let's stay with that. So the only two reasons for me to split out a microservice are either it has very different scaling requirements. So, for example, the write load versus read load is entirely different than on other parts of your system. So you need a different hosting stack or operational stack for that. And the other reason is, do you have a dedicated team working just on this single aspect of your software? But this means it's probably not micro up to most definitions anymore, because a team usually is something between 5 to 8 developers, and 5 to 8 developers working full-time on a service, that's probably not micro up to most definitions. Because, and the reasons for that, integrating on a service level is a lot harder than integrating inside a monolith, because testing or writing integration tests, automating integration tests starts getting harder. You need to have all the operational automation for each of your services. You have to have monitoring for all your services, etc., etc. Everything which happens through network is more likely to fail over time, obviously, because network communication is less stable than local communication, especially in memory communication. So I'm tempted to say don't use microservices. But on the other hand, there are by now, and again, I'm talking a little bit about e-commerce, but there are so many great services and great solutions out there, which are technically certainly not microservices anymore, that you still want to make use of them. And to be excellent again and be better than your competitors, you probably will have to use at some point some of those services you find on the internet. This can be the best possible search in an online shop, maybe even with semantic enrichment, for example. This can be the best commerce engine in the background, plus the best content management system you want to provide your marketing and search engine optimizers with. So in those cases, we might not go all microservices. And you probably noticed I do not really like thinking in microservices, but we still or will have, again, a best of breed world. And this means in the end, we again have service-oriented architecture, even nobody uses that term anymore today, with combining the best services you find for the domains you want to solve. And then integrating them, of course, still is hard. Everything across network is harder to maintain than locally, but it might then be worth the effort.
Yeah, but I see like there's a huge difference between talking about real microservices. Let's say in e-commerce, you have a checkout process where you have the checkout and the payment, and let's say the cart and the product detail page, and like all the different areas of an online shop. You split them into different services, and maybe even have, I don't know, a service that just returns the title tag of a product detail page, right? That might exist in certain bigger e-commerce shops, I have heard. There's a huge difference between that and only using and integrating a certain best of breed technology, such as a search, right?
Yeah. If you phrase it like that, I'm certainly opposing microservices because I really don't see the point in that. As mentioned, if it has different scaling requirements, or if a dedicated team is working on that, and there might even be online shops where a dedicated team is working on the title tag. I don't see that, but it might be the case. Then it can make sense. Other than that, I'm tempted to say, keep it simple, keep it stupid, and it will make your life easier. And there's another thing about that. I mean, there is this concept of hexagonal architecture, which basically, I'm really simplifying it down here, but which basically means protect your domain against the outsides and against different concepts, maybe. Which means that if you follow those principles, then it will also always be possible, if different scaling requirements show up at some point, or you can split out a certain domain into a dedicated team, to split a monolith, extract that part of your domain, which is protected against the other parts of your domain via sensible interfaces, and run a microservice on top of that just for that. Another reason, by the way, can be, and this goes into the direction of different scaling requirements, using dedicated technology, for example, dedicated storage engines. For most of your application, it might still make sense to use a relational database management system, but for this single part of your domain, it makes sense to use table-based database or document storage or something like that because of different scaling requirements. But then if you follow principles of, for example, hexagonal architecture with protecting domains against each other, then you can still split out that service. And this is the way I try to also teach inside our engineering teams, that they keep that in mind. Sensible separation of concerns. And then you will be able to split things out if it really is needed at some point.
Okay, understood. How many engineers do you actually have in your company? I mean, that also tells a lot about where it makes sense to cut and where it doesn't make sense, right?
Yes, absolutely. So if we are talking about pure product development, then we are talking about right now about 10 engineers. On top of that, we have solution architects and a customer success team closely working together with our customers. And also in support, since we are a technical product, we also have engineers again. I'm planning in this year to actually extend the development team by about 12 positions. So if you're interested in what I'm saying here, get in contact with me. I'm hiring. But yes, so the pure product development right now is 10 people. And you cannot spread 10 people across 10 microservices. This just doesn't make sense. And I even know companies who have a development team of 2 and then run 10 different microservices, where they have, they will be busy most of the time keeping dependencies in sync between those microservices.
And are you then digging a moat between frontend and backend? So do your backend engineers also work on frontend, or do you have full stack engineers, or how do you spin that?
The term full stack engineer is very much disputed, of course, but yes, we even have full stack engineers. So what I believe is, and that's another topic, if you take a look at our single page application, which we call the studio, where marketing people can orchestrate services, define how a landing page, a product detail page can look like. This is a React application with a PHP backend and a CouchDB as a database. How does such a team work together on this? So yes, a traditional way of splitting that is, okay, you have this front-end team working on the React front-end and you have a backend team working on the backend. But such a backend, even it's RESTful, PHP and all those kind of things, always should implement what the front-end team needs. And for me, this is, we also call that backend for front-end, obviously. This backend is written for the front-end developers. The front-end defines the user experience, defines the user flow, and the backend then should be optimized for that. You, of course, have to keep data modeling, domain modeling in mind, be able to test and verify that in a sensible way. But in the end, it's all about the front end to enable the workflows the product team, the user experience team wants to see there. And for me, this can only work if the engineers are working closely together on a user experience journey or a user journey, for example, having a sensible business understanding. And if you split into front-end and back-end teams, I have a hard time seeing how very good or excellent communication and product and business focus could work in such a setup. So I never got this separation, to be honest.
Okay, because from my perspective, this is like the hard point when two people, like one working on front end, one working on back end, synchronize, form contracts, and rely on each other's. Like whenever you have synchronization inside your company, it gets hard, right? In computing,
correct.
It's also hard. It's hard. Context switching and synchronization are really hard topics. And
that's an excellent summary, yes. And this is why I'm looking for engineers. If there's a front-end engineer, I love if they are able to also at least read the PHP backend code. And if it's a backend engineer, I want them to have a basic understanding at least of React and how a front-end works. And there's no need for them to be excellent in design or something, but they should get and have an understanding how the front-end works and how a framework like React, I don't care if it's Vue, React, or Angular in that case, but I want them to have a basic understanding how that works. So in the best case, the front-end developer and the back-end developer pair program on a feature they want to develop and therefore build up understanding for each other's challenges.
Okay. Yeah, looking forward to see if you can find the right people there. So I
it's possible.
I'm like, don't get me as a too skeptical person on SPAs and the complexity and front end versus back end. I mean, I'm tempted to use those technologies as well, but I also see like that there are alternatives popping up. Like, for example, in the Ruby world or Rails world, there is Hotwire recently as like the new talk in town. Hotwire means HTML over the wire. Means that you use WebSockets to, in a way, mimic the quick response times of single page web apps and the state of single page web apps. I kind of am curious to see if this is going to be successful, and if maybe in 5 years from now we have like a more simple architecture again. That's yeah. What is your take on that?
That's complex. My take on that is very complex. So I find it really interesting how different architectures can use in the web and how similar they are after all at some point again. So transferring HTML snippets or WebSockets, it sounds a lot like using PHP with FCGI, which also is a constantly running process, and no, not CGI, if somebody remembers that from the 2000s, not CGI anymore, like you start up the process every time again. And using HTTP2 with continuous connections, so not stopping and rebuilding the connection all the time. This should, in theory, have the same performance. On the other hand, there's of course a big aspect about, again, then on the server of shared state. So how does, I don't know the details of Hotwire, but how is the state on the backend managed in those cases to be able to deliver those responses via WebSocket in a very fast way? What I like about HTTP in particular, maybe REST, and also about the PHP virtual machine, which is called Send Engine, is this optimization for stateless transfer, which means that we respond or we reset the local environment basically for every request. One of the biggest benefits there is when we are talking about scale is that I can just put the next server next to it. If I get more requests on a customer side, we just increase the amount of servers or virtual servers, virtual images, Docker containers, whatever you think about there. You just put more resources to that. As soon as you have continuous state in the backend, it really gets a lot harder to scale that up. Java had that problem, at least in the beginning of this century, that they love to have consistent state inside the backend. And the only way then to scale up a Java application was to put bigger computers with more memories on the application, on the problem. This gets horribly expensive at some point. And of course, you limit your scaling abilities by the size of servers which are available right now. So I love everything which is possible to put into horizontal scaling, which means just putting computers next to that. So coming back to your Hotwire question. So that would be my first interest to understand how they solve that dilemma, or if they don't care about scaling up their applications beyond a limit where servers get really expensive or single servers get really expensive. Other than that, delivering HTML, of course, and maybe even updating only parts of the page. This is also what we did with jQuery back then, right? So like 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Which, like, at a certain point got messy whenever you had like a wizard where you had like 10 steps and you needed something like a finite state machine and stuff like that, and you needed to synchronize.
Exactly. And then we are back to state management in the front end, which is complex.
Yeah. So I understood that you would still pick PHP these days then, right?
For certain workloads, yes. So in our stack, we have Node.js backends, we have Go backends, and we have PHP backends. And for everything which is close to this stateless architecture, I would still pick PHP, yes. I think it's an amazing virtual machine for exactly this workload. PHP is, by definition, and it always was, and this was one of the core aspects of PHP from the very beginning, what's called shared nothing request processing. So what the PHP engine does, even with FCGI, where one PHP process processes a lot of requests, it has a shutdown phase at the end where it, for example, also closes all file handles, database connections, resets all the variables, the global state. You should not be using that, obviously, but it resets everything. And with the next request, you start with freshly again. As mentioned before, this enables you to do this horizontal scaling because putting the next server next to your existing servers will just work under certain circumstances. Of course, you have to take care of sessions, but those can be in the front end by now, etc.
I just wanted to mention sessions. Yeah.
Yeah. Sessions are one of the problems there, but I mean, this is solved. By now, you can use JWT sessions, which are then just stored in a cookie and secured by a hash or even encrypted sometimes. Or just use, again, a shared state for sessions. Could be a Redis server in the background, Memcache server, where the sessions are shared across all servers. So that's not a hard problem to solve. And next to that, there's almost nothing left. Maybe caches sometime, but then again, you shouldn't cache or you shouldn't need to cache.
Yeah, absolutely accepted and like a straight opinion. I think one topic where it really makes sense, not scaling up horizontally or trying to scale up horizontally, is the database, right? It's at least my learning. Like whenever, like in interview situations, I every once in a while asked the question on how someone would manage, like especially for DevOps people, would manage like a multi-master, multi-write MySQL setup. And yeah, like from my perspective, the only correct answer could be, you ain't gonna need it. There's like always a strong enough machine available that will keep you happy.
Yes and no. So there's always the limit we are talking about are basically disk writes. At some point, your hard disks, SSDs, whatever, can only sustain so many disk writes. And to be sure that your data is safely stored, you of course have to have two file sync operations, at least with the Linux kernel, to be really sure the data is safely stored. And yes, hard disks are only so fast. So if you go beyond the number of writes, you cannot do that with a single server anymore. with MySQL, this really can be a challenge. I know there are also solutions to that, but this multi-master database setups, it doesn't work as easily for MySQL, but this is one of the reasons I love CouchDB. It's a really unpopular database, and you probably shouldn't ask me more about that because otherwise I will go on that topic for hours. One thing it enables you to do very easily is sharding, which means that so you do not have referential integrity in CouchDB, which makes it a lot easier, but it's a document-based database, so you usually don't need that anyways. There are cases for that still, but what it enables you to do first sharding based on your entity types. That would be based on tables in MySQL. And then again, you can even continue to use consistent hashing, for example, on maybe the ID of your entity to put that in different servers and then still merge all the results. This again only works because they are not using SQL to select data, but MapReduce to run queries on your data, which is a lot harder to get, especially for people new to CouchDB and MapReduce. But there are technologies for that which can work. And on top of that, CouchDB has multi-master eventual consistent replication, which even works back to China, so between China and Europe with connection drops. There are challenges involved. I would love to talk more about that, but this probably won't fit into this podcast.
Yeah, I also remember like me trying CouchDB a few years ago. I also know one of the inventors, Jan. I guess you know him too.
Yeah, I know Jan very well.
I think it's a great piece of software. I think they had actually good timing because they just like CouchDB just came out whenever there was like a certain NoSQL trend, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know what they missed. In
the marketing by MongoDB was better.
Potentially,
that's at least my summary of it. I like CouchDB a lot more than MongoDB, but the marketing wasn't as good. I mean, CouchDB is an Apache project, so fully open source, and MongoDB has a big company behind it, so it's of course also an unfair competitor from that point of view.
But there's also Couchbase, right? And there was a certain merger with Couchbase, and Couchbase is, I think, private equity owned and so on. So there is something.
Couchbase basically is MemcacheDB. So even both have couch in the name, and even the same main author. They from an architecture point of view, they have almost nothing in common to me. So it's more or less a Memcache-DB.
Okay, yeah, I never looked at that. To be honest. I just was irritated by the name.
That confused many people over the last years. Wasn't the best choice to use that name from my point of view.
So I think we could go on and nerd for hours here.
Yes, sounds like it.
I really enjoy that. I still have a few more questions towards leadership. I think we can skip my remote questions, as I know you're fully remote and you might have good ideas, but I think it's always good to have a certain spin in the podcast, and we did it mostly technical. Coming to my typical outro questions. I'd like to know the 3 most impactful learnings for you as a leader in the last years.
The first one is, and that's a learning probably everybody makes who funds a new startup and scales it up, is that your job as a CTO will constantly change, and it basically won't be the same for more than 2 or 3 months. With new people coming in, it's interesting because it's also a conflict between the abilities you have as a founder, or the abilities I have, where I'm most efficient in the company, and how to help new people best, how to do what they know best and can do best inside the company. And this meant for me that I constantly had to look for new places where I'm most efficient and can help to make our shared vision come to life best. And it's of course also not easy to do that all the time. And that takes me right to the next learning. I wasn't too bad keeping my work-life balance in the company I had before, which was not about developing a product. But keeping a work-life balance in such a scaling startup is damn hard. And I fail at that, I have to say. I really try to make sure our employees do not work overtime, at least not unless it's really required. If you're very close to a deadline, this very seldomly happens. This happened like 2 times in Frontastic now. So I really try to keep this from happening, to have this not happen. But for me as a leader with the feedback people need, this is really, really hard. And last but not least, to get more technical again, I think pull requests and pull request reviews are horribly overrated. This is, many people won't agree with that, I guess. But from what I learned again and again is that the first, and this is common knowledge, the longer a pull request gets, the less review it will get. The second thing is, which means that people fail to take the time a good and long pull request might need to review and really understand the side effects of everything. I like trunk-based development. Trunk is a term from SVN. I don't like the term master or main branch-based development, where you always have a stable main branch. And having said that, I think pair programming is far more efficient in knowledge sharing between developers than reviews of pull requests can ever be, especially because the more complex a pull request gets, usually the less intensely it will be reviewed by your fellow developers.
Because in a way, it means context switching, right? You need to, get it running if you really want to review it fully. Yes. End to end, and then you fail on the way, and you rather do like a pair programming session. There's also always this implicit architectural or software design context, which you will always talk about when you do pair programming. So like this question, why are you doing it this way? Then you can explain about architectural constraints you have. You can explain software design constraints or experience you had earlier when working on the same piece of code. But this, of course, can happen in pull requests, but I see this happen so seldomly that you chit-chat basically about related things. And especially the more abstract it gets, the harder it is to also write things down and document things. And this will also hit you in pull request reviews because they are usually in written text inside some code and closely related to code. So the big picture and the vision usually is also lost there and easier to communicate about or chat about inside pair programming. I find that, or I see that at least very often. Mm. Yeah, interesting perspective. I also see that like pair programming sessions are very much more effective in so many ways. So I widely agree here.
They also drain so much energy because you will be focused so intensely when working together with somebody because you also do not want to look stupid, for example. They will drain a lot of energy. This is a different problem. And if you pair program for 4 hours, you probably should call your 8-hour day a day already because you invested all the energy you have.
Yeah, makes sense. Any tool you right now drive your friends crazy with, like anything you discovered, you in a way drive people nuts with?
Maybe not nuts, but a tool I really like. As you mentioned, we are fully remote, and in this space, it's kind of hard to build the social connections and also kind of hard to run into random people from your company which are not working in your department and which you aren't meeting all the time with. I love GatherTown. The Chaos Computer Club used a similar tool for the last conference, which is proximity chatting in an online game, you could say. So you have a simple two-dimensional space where you can walk around, and as soon as you get close to some person, a video chat will start. And we have an office, a virtual office in GatherTown. I really like using that because you chat with people from other departments and you can run into people again, which usually doesn't happen in remote environments. And I even convinced my wife, who is a teacher, to use that during COVID times for her class, because this enabled all the pupils of her class to join in this virtual classroom and also just chat with each other. So they were able to build groups close to a small lake or close to a tree, for example, and just chat inside that group without only one single person talking or being able to talk in a Zoom call, for example. So it's a little bit fun. Some people are annoyed by the gaming aspect of that because this to them does not belong into a work context, but I love it to get the social aspect of remote work at least solved a little bit.
Interesting. Do you actually do your meetings in there, or is it just like a constantly open space where people drop in every morning, or how does that work?
Both. So, for example, in the morning, there's at the kitchen table often a group of developers, often the same, but sometimes other people too join there and have their morning chat. But we also have meeting rooms in there. And for example, if there is an emergency situation, we have an emergency meeting room where we meet also in GatherTown for all people who want to help with that emergency. And the nice thing, again, is, of course, you can see who is there and what's happening. And we also have desks in our GatherTown. And this implicit communication of your work state, are you at the terrace outside? Are you at the kitchen table? Or are you at your desk? Or are you in the meeting room with a couple of people? Everybody immediately knows if they are able to chat with you or not, because at your desk, they know, okay, they are probably working on something. So if it's really urgent, I will get to them. If you're at the kitchen table, you know, I can go by and just chat with him because I want to. And if they're in a meeting room with others, you immediately know I probably shouldn't disturb them right now. And this Slack status messages cannot solve it this nicely, I think.
But Slack also recently launched a feature for this, right? To in a way solve it, like that audio chat that they integrated, where you can just hang out in certain channels and talk to people, talk about something, and everyone can join and so on.
Because of GatherTown, I never used that, to be honest, and nobody in our company is using that. I think the reason for that is that we have our virtual office in GatherTown already.
And who built that office?
Actually, it was me. This is an interesting fun fact. I did that as a weekend project. One interesting fun fact about me is that, and not many IT people have that, I was thinking when I finished school, should I study architecture, arts, or computer science? Computer science, of course, was the best choice for earning money, but I have an artist in me, and I like to draw, for example, and I'm not too bad at visual things, which is, given my backend focused role and architecture focused role, probably a very seldom thing.
Okay, interesting. If I ever want to build a GatherTown, I would then ping you and ask you if you can build mine.
Yes. So my race might be a little bit too high for that, but yes, go ahead.
Please ask this guy if you want to have a GatherTown. So, last but not least, my closing question. My favorite PHP function besides NL2BR is the function PHP info. And I guess you didn't know, but I have a friend called Thies Arntzen who, like, back in the days worked a lot in the inner core of PHP, and he told me that there's like a secret parameter for that function, and it allows you passing a hash over, which has like a secret name that you just can't guess what it is, and it allows you to pass in a time travel parameter, and I now spin up my PHP engine on my computer, and I pass time travel 2005 to that PHP info function, and we travel back in time now, and we see yourself like working at Easy Systems back then, quite a young guy still, and we now observe yourself coding PHP. And silently whispering stuff that I can't understand. And you now have the chance to whisper something into young Kore's ears. What would it be?
There's so much more to learn. there's an interesting fun thing about developers, I think. Once they go beyond the classic junior stage, there is a state where each developer thinks they know everything. And I think back then, that's about the time I was in exactly that state. I thought, okay, I know everything about PHP now. I know everything about web application development. And there were so many things I wasn't even able to see. And the more experienced you get, the more the world opens up again and you see and understand all the things you don't know. You probably, how many things there will be which you will never be able to understand because there's just not enough time for that. And so many more things open up where you can learn interesting things. So yeah, there's so much more to know everywhere.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
I hope old Kore won't be depressed by that. Young Kore.
Yeah, I don't know if young Kore would change something then, or would just be curious to learn more. So thanks a lot, Kore. It was a lot of fun talking to you, and maybe we repeat that at a certain time. And I wish you all the best and all the luck this world has to offer with your company, and hope to see you soon again.
Thanks a lot. It was really, really nice talking to you. I enjoyed it a lot. I would love to do this again at some point, maybe when there are some interesting news somewhere. So thanks a lot.
Let's do that. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.